Junagadh was also a very interesting state where it had pockets of its own territory in other princely states, and other princely states had small pockets of territory in Junagadh itself. Was a man called Sir Shah Nawaz Bhutto. Yes, of course, the grandfather of Benazir Bhutto and the father of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. Junagadh, ironically and interestingly, became the first princely state that joined Pakistan in September 1947. Junagagh's joining shocked everyone. Shah Nawaz Bhutto gave the control over Junagadh to the regional commissioner of Rajkot in Kathiawar region and came over to Pakistan. Kashmir had the opposite situation where the ruler was a Hindu and the population was majority Muslim. So Pakistan wondered, if the ruler is Muslim and the population majority Hindu, and if then India gets a right to occupy and take over the state, shouldn't Pakistan do the same in Kashmir? Jinnah represented the Khan of Kalat in his argument towards the government of India in claiming that Kalat was not an Indian princely state. Amongst them were very important countries that we'll talk about now. Hyderabad, of course, was the largest one, and Kashmir the other one, but since neither of them eventually joined Pakistan, we will exclude them from our discussion today. The two others, which are very significant and important, we will just talk about now, which again in a chapter of my book is covered very much in detail, and in fact for the first time a lot of primary sources are used in describing the story of their integration. So the first princely state that I really want to talk about here is Junagadh. Junagadh, as you can see, is a very small princely state in the Kathiawar region of Gujarat in India now. And there the interesting thing was that the ruler there was a Nawab who was a Muslim, whereas over 80% of the population was Hindu. Junagadh was also a very interesting state where it had pockets of its own territory in other princely states, and other princely states had small pockets of territory in Junagadh itself. When the question over the lapse of paramountcy came, it was expected that Junagadh, in line with its neighboring princely states, because they were so intricately linked and had pockets in each other's territories, would all en masse join the government of India and not Pakistan. But towards the end of August, things began to change. Why? Because Junagagh's Diwan, the Prime Minister, was a man called Sir Shah Nawaz Bhutto. Yes, of course, the grandfather of Benazir Bhutto and the father of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. Sir Shah Nawaz Bhutto was a Muslim League politician, and he impressed upon the Nawab that if he did not sign over to Pakistan and signed over to India, India would remove him immediately, curb his love of dogs. He had over 200-300 dogs, and also prevent him from his favorite pastime, which was shooting the Gir lions in the Junagadh forest. So Nawab Mahabat Khanji got very scared and concerned and said that he did not want all his privileges and powers to end so abruptly, and therefore Junagadh, ironically and interestingly, became the first princely state that joined Pakistan in September 1947. Junagagh's joining shocked everyone because it had no land connection to Pakistan. Its port, Verawal, was hundreds of miles away from Karachi. It only had an outlet to the sea, but the complicated nature of its territory meant that states that had acceded to India were now within Junagadh, and Junagagh's pockets were in states that had acceded to India also. Now this situation, even though legally correct and tenable, became a very untenable and a very complicated situation in reality. There was a general disenchantment and a rising amongst the people of Junagadh. Mahatma Gandhi's nephew, Samal Das Gandhi, became a leader of the Junagadh uprising. They did a blockade of Junagadh, and things began to get from bad to worse. By October 1947, it was very clear that it would be very hard for Junagadh to remain a part of Pakistan. The Diwan of Junagadh, Sir Shah Nawaz Bhutto, and the ruler Mahabat Khanji appealed to the government of Pakistan for some help, but the government of Pakistan also had just been created and they could not really help them beyond sending a couple of companies of police that could hardly maintain law and order. As the blockade strengthened and as the Indian forces also gathered around the borders of Junagadh, things began to get out of hand within the country. So eventually, by the end of October 1947, Nawab Mahabat Khanji fled to Karachi with his wives, with his dogs, with his jewels, and with anything that he could carry. And a few days thereafter, on the 1st of November 1947, Sir Shah Nawaz Bhutto gave the control over Junagadh to the regional commissioner of Rajkot in Kathiawar region and came over to Pakistan. The Indian government quickly took over, and within a few weeks, they arranged a plebiscite where over 90% agreed that they should join India. Pakistan protested. There were lots of letters between Jinnah and Mountbatten, between Liaquat Ali Khan and Nehru, but except for these protests, Pakistan could not do much. Junagadh was too far, too small, perhaps too insignificant for them to care. But why did Pakistan do this? There are several conjectures, there are several arguments about this, but one main thing which is very persistent and has been for 75 years is that, except for the fact that it was a legally correct decision to take, even though practically very hard to maintain, the reason Pakistan did this was that at the same time another question was erupting. Yes, and you can guess it correctly, that was of Kashmir. Kashmir had the opposite situation where the ruler was a Hindu and the population was majority Muslim. So Pakistan wondered, if the ruler is Muslim and the population majority Hindu, and if then India gets a right to occupy and take over the state, shouldn't Pakistan do the same in Kashmir? This is what Pakistan was eyeing, and this is what Pakistan was hoping to use the Junagadh logic for. Of course, as we all know, unfortunately, India took over both Junagadh and, of course, large parts of Kashmir, disregarding its own principle which it had applied in the case of Junagadh. So the first accession to Pakistan, sadly, was an aborted accession of Junagadh, which, except for the fact that the Nawab's family still now lives in Karachi, ironically across the road from India House, which used to be the Deputy High Commission of India. No other part of Junagadh, no other government of Junagadh ended up in Pakistan. But the Khan is still recognized as ruler in Pakistan, gets a stately pension, and is still called His Highness the Nawab of Junagadh. Chapter 3 of my book talks about another very interesting accession to Pakistan, which to this date remains very controversial, and in fact, to this date has become one of the starting points of a major insurgency in Pakistan. And yes, you can guess it correctly, it's related to Balochistan and the Baloch insurgency. This is the story of the state of Kalat in Balochistan. Modern day Balochistan's approximately 90% landmass formed the part of the state of Kalat, and its accession to this day remains very controversial. There is a nationalist view, there is an official government of Pakistan view, and therefore I had to tread on eggshells to really find out what practically happened, what were the exact timeline through which Kalat did or did not become a part of Pakistan. So if you read my book, there'll be a lot of details there about the whole accession saga of Kalat. But let me give you some important pointers there so that you may be able to understand intricacies of this Kalat saga, the problems that emanated from it, and the issues that still continue to this day about the region. So the first thing that one must understand about Kalat is that the Baloch society is a very complicated society, and very many anthropologists who have worked on it over the last century or so have not been able to completely understand it. A lot of people think that it's a very federal kind of a society where you have a tribal head, in this case the Khan of Kalat, who was the ruling prince, but he ruled over a federating units where each tribe and its elders, its Nawabs, were sharing power with the prince, with the Khan. Some people say that no, it's a very unitary state where the Khan has a lot of power. Other people have a belief that different regions are practically independent of each other, and their Sardars and Nawabs and Khans can act as they want to do. The government of India, interestingly enough, the British government of India, tried to understand the nature of governance in Kalat, and every time it tried to do so, it ended up saying, we just don't really get it. We just don't understand how the Khan rules. We know the Khan rules. We just don't know how he rules. At times he rules through the Sardars, at times he rules directly, at times he rules in a mix of both those ways. And in different territories, it varies dramatically. So one of the things which complicated and still complicates the understanding of Balochistan is the fact that how governance is actually practiced in the region. And this became a huge problem at the time of the decision over the accession towards Pakistan or not. Now, Kalat was also very interesting because the ruler of Kalat at that time, Mir Ahmed Yar Khan, was a very close friend of the founder of Pakistan, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. In fact, Quaid-e-Azam was Ahmed Yar Khan's lawyer in front of the government of India in a very interesting case that has a direct impact on what happened to Kalat afterwards. Jinnah represented the Khan of Kalat in his argument towards the government of India in claiming that Kalat was not an Indian princely state. This is a very interesting thing. Well, it's in Pakistan now, it was in India earlier. So what was this reason this reasoning behind why the Khan thought that Kalat was not a part of India? Well, the Khan's argument was that that the region where Kalat is, modern-day Balochistan, had very little to do with the mainland of India, let's say Lahore or Delhi for that matter, or Agra. And historically, he said, their closer connections were either with Afghanistan or Iran. True, partially to an extent, but of course it was a part of the Mughal Empire for a long time too, and therefore had connections to the rest of India, as well as of course Afghanistan and Iran. And again, one must not forget that large parts of Afghanistan were also part of the Mughal Empire, and therefore a part of India for a long time. His other argument was that the agreements that the British signed with Kalat, especially the treaties in the 1840s and the 1850s, the independence of Kalat, that the British are going to respect the independence of Kalat. And therefore, he argued that Kalat was an independent country which was just in a treaty relationship with the British government of India. This was very easily answered by the British government of India because most of its treaties with most of the princely states in India, including places like Hyderabad or Jodhpur or Jaipur or Gwalior, mention the word independence. But this independence is understood as if it were under the paramountcy, the suzerainty of the British Crown. So it is of a limited kind, and this is what the government of India explained. The third argument that the Khan of Kalat made was that when in 1877, when the then Khan of Kalat attended the Great Durbar, where Queen Victoria was declared Empress of India, the Khan of Kalat was treated as a non-Indian prince and was not given the banners given to other Indian princes. Now, interestingly enough, as my book shows, this was true. The Khan of Kalat was not treated like an Indian prince then. But then the Ahmadiyar Khan forgot to mention what happened afterwards. The then Khan of Kalat pleaded with the British government of India and said, no, I do want to be recognized as an Indian prince. Please make me an Indian prince and give me all the rights and privileges that are of an Indian prince. So if before 1877 Kalat was not a part of India, after 1877, due to the pleading of the Khan of Kalat himself, Kalat became a part of India, and the subsequent Darbars in 1903, in 1911 do clearly show that the Khan was always treated like an Indian prince. But of course, this was the view of Ahmadiyar Khan, and he had Jinnah Sahib as a lawyer propagating this, that Kalat was really a state that was not a part of India, was a different independent state that was only in some kind of a treaty relationship with India.